Now, let's come to the 01st April 2016 newspaper. Now, a new financial year, a new beginning. So why the Belgium is a target for the terror attacks? And why specifically the Europe at large is becoming a target? And what are the reasons? Now you know that the Belgium has a huge cultural divide. It is a loosely assigned federation. In this case, it consists of two populations who are culturally very much divided. The Flemish-speaking Flanders, French-speaking Walloons. Now these two people made it as a weak state. It means that it is a loosely held compromised federal state which has no proper control over its administrative structures. And this divide is visible in every institution across the Belgium. And added to that, the open borders across the Europe, it made the terror elements to move from one country to the other country freely. And third, the Belgium is the headquarters for the European Union, NATO, etc. Added to that Belgium administrative system, if we observe, the privacy of citizens is excessively stressed, and there is a complacency in the administrative apparatus towards the terrorism and national security. And in this context, existence of multiplicity of counter-terrorism and intelligence agencies across the European Union and lack of proper cooperation among them in the name of the privacy of the citizens, it has made the work of the terrorists much easier. So in this context, the Islamic State's appeal for a supremacy of the faith, creation of the caliphate, it has attracted many of the youth who are seeing the present social environment in the Europe is against their values and ethos. So this has led to a huge movement, a revival movement of Islam, and it is also one way has led a breeding ground for the Islamic State. Coming to the terror database, you know that United States of America has proposed under its Homeland Security Presidential Directive for a joining of various countries into its database, terror database. Now, India has declined to join this terror database on privacy concerns. Now, if India joins this, the United States of America gets complete access to our terror-related database, and the same is not reciprocated from the United States of America. And in this context, it will highly compromise our military operations, intelligence operations. So, the RA and Intelligence Bureau has opposed to this. That's why India is not giving any access to our databases and is not willing to join this global terror database maintained by the United States. Tata at chorus. Now you see, the Great Britain is going through a crisis phase, especially with regard to its steel industry. Now, the China has created the overcapacities in the steel industry. Whatever the China produced from 2014 in steel industry is more than what Europe has produced from its industrial revolution. To that extent, their overcapacities are created. That's why, due to devaluation of its currency, cheap steel is coming across the world. Even if you see in India, India is imposing the protection duty against the cheap steel which is coming to protect the industry over here. So added to that, the cost of production is very high in Britain, especially the electricity costs, environmental restrictions if we take into consideration. On the other hand, the Tata Steel has acquired the chorus at a huge $13 billion, and the losses which have accumulated for this have led to the total net worth of the factory dominated by the debt now. So finally, Tata's made a decision to close down the Tata Steel. So in this context, the 15,000 plus employees are going to be unemployed. So the Britain government want to intervene in these matters. However, will it find a solution is the major question. So in this context, already a referendum is going on in the Britain about it continuing in the European Union. If the Britain intervenes and nationalizes the steel industry, it may attract the sanctions from the European Union. So it may build a negative sentiment in the people against European Union and is expected to influence the voting pattern on whether Britain has to continue in the European Union or not. So Prime Minister Cameron made a strategic statement over here. So the continuation of the European Union is necessary to take access to the Europe market for its steel. But however, that shows the impact of the fall in global commodity prices and also the impact of the Chinese cheap steel. Coming to the pharma industry in India, you all know that India's pharma industry is regulated at the state level, and added to that, there is no proper overseeing mechanism. So if you take United States of America, the FDA, the Federal Drug Agency, it is a central or a focal point for the regulation. That's why in India, lack of proper regulation and control, we are seeing the growth of spurious drugs, and also the generic drugs without proper compositions are coming into the market. It is leading to increase in drug resistance. So what the author suggests here is this: we need to create a think tank which can conduct the sufficient research on the drug regulatory framework. And any generic drug that has to be introduced in the market, it has to go through a battery of pharmaceutical tests. The bioequivalence studies, they are called as, all the pharmaceutical drugs which are to be released into the market has to go through these biomedical tests. That is, bioequivalence studies. And next is the drug licenses which are been given at the state levels, or which have to be cancelled by the state governments, have led to many irregularities, because a factory will be there somewhere in Uttarakhand and the drugs are sold throughout the country. So it means the ultimate decision to close down the license for that factory lies in the Uttarakhand government rather than in the central government. So Uttarakhand has an advantage to run the factory over there because it generates the employment. It is never interested in cancelling its licenses. So as like in the United States of America, in India too, the drug licensing has to be made centralized. These are the steps we need to take up. Coming to the rare frogs, especially this is related to the biodiversity question. Now, remember these points factually as they are. Now, there is a dancing frog that is called as Micrizalus herae. So, these animals, they complete their life cycle if there is a complete habitat is kept intact in the Western Ghats. Now, the destruction of the habitats is also making them endangered species. So what are the major reasons for the depletion of the biodiversity in the Western Ghats? One is the increasing chemical pollution, climate change, invasive species, the disease and invasive species, that is the hunting by the local tribal population, excessive hunting by the local tribal population, and added to that, the development without proper environmental impact assessment. All these are leading to a fall in the environmental biodiversity in the Western Ghats. We know that Western Ghats are the biological hotspots of India. So, in this case, Gadgil Committee recommendations you need to check out and try to complete the today's answer through this. The focus on safeguards agreement. Now, you know that Washington-based nuclear threat initiative, it has placed the India in the vulnerable category for the security risks. Why? Because a sabotage is possible in India because of the widespread corruption which is involved with the nuclear establishments. So our nuclear bomb can fall into the wrong hands. The second thing is the dirty bomb is a possibility because the radioactive material is loosely available with regard to the medical establishments and laboratories in India. So this can be stuck to the IEDs and a dirty bomb can be prepared. These are the two major risks for India according to this nuclear threat initiative, a Washington-based think tank. Now on the other hand, we also have seen with regard to the Pakistan, it is deploying the battlefield nuclear weapons which are called tactical nuclear weapons. So whenever a nuclear weapon comes to battlefield, there is a greater threat, it can fall into the wrong hands or its security can be compromised. So that's why Washington is urging the Pakistan to remove its nuclear weapons from the battlefield. But however, the request is not been heard by the Pakistan. What the Pakistan says is it needs some full spectrum nuclear protection. The reason being is India's cold start doctrine, it wants to give a fitting reply through the tactical nuclear weapons. but however it is posing a threat to the global nuclear security. Now coming to core sectors. Previously there was a question in UPSC prelims. Which of the following are the core sectors? You know that there are 8 core sectors. What are they? Coal, crude oil, natural gas, refinery products, fertilizers, steel, cement, electricity. Now they add up to around 38% in index of industrial production. So you know that the last 3 months there is a fall in IIP. Now for the first time the IIP in the core sectors has expanded by 5.7%. It is majorly due to the increase in fertilizers and then cement, electricity. They have contributed to its expansion. On the other hand, if you can see, the steel is on to the negative side, and to an extent the crude oil is also showing on to the negative side. So coming to the India European Union Summit. So you know that we are discussing this for the past 2 days. The objective is to bring in a broad-based trade and investment agreement. But however, ongoing diplomatic tensions are throwing a shadow on this BTIA. So first is the issue of Italian marines. Now the second is the European Union sanctions on Indian generic drugs on procedural grounds. So in this context, what the summit said is, both the parties, that is India and European Union, expressed their confidence on the International Court of Arbitration with regard to Italian marines are concerned. And the second is, European Union is the largest trading partner and export destination for India. So in this context, to the possible extent, the issues have to be solved through the dialogue. So here, European Union and India agenda for action 2020 is declared. So it means the talks on broad-based trade and investment agreement are resumed. And clean energy, climate, terrorism, both the parties have showed a convergence. Especially there is this development on the terrorism. Both the parties, they have expressed an urge for early adoption of UN Convention on Terrorism. So it means that the Europe, which did not took the India's concerns on terrorism very seriously, it started taking a look at them. So a UN Convention on Terrorism was expressed as support from both the parties. And added to that, the European Union and the member countries are showing interest in India's smart cities, the Clean India Initiative, Namo Gange or Ganga Rejuvenation Program, Namo Gange. So especially, so this shows a greater engagement. But however, there are few irritants. What India wants to open up its services to the Europe, but Europe did not give it a status of a data protection or data protective country. So without this status, the IT sector cannot grow in European Union. And the second thing is, European Union is expecting India to remove the duty tariffs on automobiles and its spirits and wines, which India has not readily acceded to. So these are the irritants which we need to continue further. Next is, coming to the Indian Express, there is a very good argument. Prime Minister Modi said that India has to come out of this regular election mood, and parliamentary and then state elections and local elections, they have to be conducted at the same time. So to what extent is this right, is the question. Now, on the positive side, it will relieve the people and government machinery from the constant election mood, so that the government of the day can focus on governance rather than on elections. And as and when elections are conducted, the code of conduct comes into play. So these election cycles make the governance delivery mechanisms to come to a standstill. So it means no development program can be initiated at that point of time. And the second thing, on the other side, understand our federal polity got deepened due to multiple elections. So when elections were conducted simultaneously during the Jawaharlal Nehru era for legislative assembly and the union parliament, mostly the union or central issues have dominated the voting pattern. But when separate elections were conducted, for the local elections, local issues started taking the central stage, and for state elections, the state issues started taking the central stage. It means a way people started judging the center and the state based on their own merits rather than one inflicting on the other. And administratively, it is also nightmare to conduct all the elections on one single day or elections simultaneously. Now, if you come to the constitutional question, if a government has performed for 2 years and it has done away with or it has lost the confidence of the House, then how the state has to be governed for the remaining period? This is what is the question. And how you shall bring back it into the schedule? These are the new constitutional questions comes up. Above all, elections are an important part of representative democracy, and the government of the day has to be given a regular public mood about its governance. So in India, the elections are the only way out for this. So in this context, elections have their own or the existing pattern has its own advantages. These are the arguments you can make. Now, India-European Union summit at the Brussels. Already we spoke about it. There is a convergence on terrorism and the broad-based trade and investment dialogue is resumed. Added to that, there is CAMM, that is Common Agenda on Migration and Mobility, which can solve the issues related to the Indian workers migrating and moving on liberal visa regime, which can boost up the services trade between both the groups. That is what is the thing we spoke about. And coming to this, with regard to the Indian agriculture, this article, why Indian agriculture cannot be a business and what are the characteristics of this? Now, any business, it keeps its risk to the minimum. But Indian agriculture, the risk at the production level, the risk at the price level are very high. And they are not on a season to season basis, but they are on a day to day basis. So when risk is so high, the insurance cannot operate in such a place. So Indian farmers are vulnerable to greater number of risks. And second, now whenever economy of scales have to be achieved, bargaining power has to be achieved. So there has to be the wholesale market has to operate. But in India, the farmers sell the goods at a retail level and they are being traded at a later date at the wholesale level. So that's why the farmers don't have a bargaining power with the traders in India. And the next is, here the cooperative societies can help, however cooperative society is slowly dying in India. The next, expansion in agriculture is seen as a crime. Generally the socialistic mindset will not allow for expansion of the agriculture and the legal and rule framework will not provide for consolidation and expansion on a larger scale. And any new technology introduction in agriculture is a matter of controversy, especially related to GM crops. And you know that the GM cotton, how the controversy it has created. Finally, the positive advantages of this have led to the country realizing our introduction of GM varieties into the commercial crops. Now GM mustard, GM brinjal, everywhere there is a controversy. So these are the 4 challenges Indian agriculture is facing as of now, according to the author. And added to that, we have discussed about the Belgium, why is it a terror target. So here the author says this, the most effective friend of the terrorism is the complacency. So the Belgium and its administrative complacency made it a narrow center for the European terrorism. So these are the articles. Now let's see the yesterday's question. Indian e-commerce market is expected to touch 69 billions by 2020. Do you expect the present policy decline or not? So price determinants is the major objective of the market. It has to come from demand and supply. In this context, the 25% restriction by this policy and also the e-commerce shall not intervene directly or indirectly in determining the prices. And marketplace model, inventory based model. These are more kind of restrictions imposed on the e-commerce. So in this context, a free market or an open market is necessary for the growth of the e-commerce. So this is on the negative side, you have to argue this way. But however, the protection of the brick and mortar. So however, it is the rule of the market that the only a level playing field can exist among the equals. So when we consider these as 2 different models, the state shall not try to create the level playing field. When the over-regulation comes up by the state, it stalls the expansion of an market space and also it leads to corruption and litigation. So there is a kind of an over-regulation in the e-commerce, but however, it has defined the e-commerce and given a proper direction to the growth of the e-commerce the other side. through these 5 points you can argue over here. Thank you very much. All the best.